on the Gamebridge Ball State Cardinals Sports Network from Learfield. Welcome to This Week in Ball State Sports, a Ball State Athletics podcast, highlighting the Cardinals athletics teams and administration each week. Presented by Gamebridge. Here's the voice of the Cardinals, your host, Mick Tidrow.
All right, Cardinal fans, welcome into episode 4 of This Week in Ball State Sports, season 2 of the podcast. Appreciate your support. Again, send in those questions. You can email us, Ball State Sports Podcast, or DM us on any of our social media platforms. Submit your questions. We'll have them read throughout the year. We have a really good show for you lined up. Dr. Lindsey Blom is our first guest today, Senior Associate AD for Championship Performance. Also have head coach Mike New on the podcast, and then a couple of women's golf guests as well. Dr. Blom, really appreciate you joining us here on the podcast. Second time after last year. Your role has changed a little bit and evolved, but thank you for joining us.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the role. Thanks.
What has changed in the last year? What have you learned about this job?
Well, I'll first say that I am just really grateful to be in this space. It's a space that I continue to be excited about, feel grateful for the work that's been done, for the ideas that are coming out of the collaborations, and have a really big vision for the future.
When you hear championship performance within your job description, what do you want people to know about that aspect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think because it can mean a lot of things, that when I talk to our student athletes, prospective student athletes and their families and our coaches, that I say it's our 1% better space. It's our space where we can see incremental changes over time if we do the little things in all of these spaces. And to me, this is where you go from good to great and from great to awesome. And so really thinking about how to be deliberate. They are not spaces where we can accidentally be good in them. We have to be deliberate, focused, collaborative, and then we get that 1% growth.
You're talking about that growth and being deliberate within that. You work within the football team as well as supervising some of the other sports. What is your role with the football squad?
Yeah, so with all of our sports around our mental performance, teams and coaches can ask for one of our graduate students or one of our consultants to do teamwork around mental skills and mental performance. And that is really designed based on what that team needs and wants. And then individual student athletes can also ask to work with somebody if they just want to grow that 1% better around their own mental game. And then that's an individual session that can be designed for their growth and development. So specifically for football, Coach New has been a real proponent of mental performance for a long time, since his tenure here. And he's had different people come in at different times to support that work. Currently with our structure now, he has an opportunity to utilize me as well as 4 of our graduate students to be really systematic in the work that he puts in. So this spring, they spent about 6 weeks weekly meeting. We met with the coaches and the student athletes in a very foundational, deliberate mental skills program. So it designed 6 skills that we would focus on to really build up, just like you would other spaces, that foundational skill, level set all the coaches around it, because he had a lot of new staff members, as well as the student athletes. And the student athletes were really participatory. They were great in those sessions. And then after we finished the spring, moved into summer, and we built on those skills. So we went from the foundational pieces to really how do you implement those into practice. So really started thinking about when fall camp started, what did those look like in those spaces? And then because there were new guys coming in, we also ran kind of like a mental skills boot camp with those guys to make sure we could kind of catch them up from the spring work that we had done to kind of get them up to being in line with where the other student athletes are. And then as the season came into play, it gets hectic. And so there's less time, which is very typical for most teams for those team sessions. So we do more individual work. And so student athletes who want to do individual work, that amps up. We also have something called BioSound, which is this opportunity it's kind of like an athletic training bed, and it's a multimodal sensory experience that works on syncing the heart and the head, so the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So it's a form of relaxation, it's a form of biofeedback, but it's also this opportunity to really align the two components so that we want physically working when we're performing. And so there's football players who enjoy that, and they come in for that, as well as other student athletes. And then we also have the night before before games, they have a relaxation and visualization session that they do. And then we have consultants around if individuals want to kind of talk through what they may be feeling about the game. And then same thing for game day. We have people who are around, so if student athletes want to have a quick kind of chat in preparation, just like they would physically, we're there to support that as well.
That is a lot packed into game day and before game day responsibilities within your role, Dr. Blom. How have you been able to see the growth of the football program in that mental aspect?
Yeah, I think with the coaches and with the players, being present and seeing mental performance be tangible is a big deal. So Coach New said early on, like, we're going to do this. I want to make sure we're consistent and we have people who can show up regularly. So we've been committed to that. We have people at practice, and then again, like I mentioned, the night before games and game day, so we can be present. And I had one student athlete say that just when they see the mental performance consultants, it reminds them of some of the skills we've talked about. Even if they're not engaging, it's that visual reminder. And so that has been impactful in that time. And sometimes people don't know when they might need something. And so being there is a good opportunity. And just like other fields, people are more likely to use services when they're readily available, when it is consistent, and when they're just there. And so by being present, we see the student athletes and the coaches interact and engage deliberately, which is different than if they had to schedule a session and go somewhere else. That takes a little bit more time. And so being present in those spaces allows for that engagement.
How are you seeing that engagement outside of football for the other 18 sports on campus?
Yeah. So I think last year we did about 400 hours of mental performance work with our graduate students and those teams, which is a great collaboration across the board. And so we have seen growing requests from our coaches to have regular sessions, and they're learning more and more about how to implement mental skills productively into the work that they do. We have several other teams that at different times will have a consultant travel with them, and we hear similar feedback of like when that consultant's with them, it reminds them about being grounded, relaxing, and those foundational mental skills. And then we have a bunch of student athletes that request to see individuals. And sometimes that lasts 1 or 2 sessions. Sometimes that'll last throughout the season. Kind of depends on what happens. But it's something that our student athletes are asking for, our coaches are asking for, and sometimes our coaches even want to talk through a scenario of how to maximize and help a student athlete thrive. And so we have those kind of coach conversations with them as well.
Dr. Lindsey Blom joining us here on This Week in Ball State Sports. Dr. Blom, the vision of 2030 is only 6 years away, and that seems like a long time, but in a 6-year window, there's so much that this university, this department, and these programs want to accomplish within those 6 years. So how, in your position, can you help best put the university and this department in that position to be successful for that 2030 vision?
Well, saying 2030 out loud when we talked about it with the staff did scare us all just a little bit, I have to admit. But now it's my new favorite number because I know that we can accomplish a lot and we can be really deliberate. And when we have a path and kind of set some goals for that, there's a lot more opportunity to actually meet those goals. We can be much more deliberate, much more tangible, and much more collaborative because other people then know how to contribute. People want to contribute, but if they don't know what they're contributing to, they don't know how to contribute productively. So I am really excited about 2030 and what we can do in those spaces. And we're starting to set up annual goals for each of the 4 areas that I oversee, as well as what 2030 should look like in each of those spaces. And some of that is more tangible than others. I mean, the new Championship Performance Center is very tangible in the strength and conditioning spaces. We've added Bridge as a software that allows us to have all of the workouts that are tangible on a phone and iPad for our student athletes. It can be more easily interchanged, and they can use them off-site. So that's been growing. We've been doing some more work in the athletic training space. We obviously talked about the mental performance space. We would love to actually get a dually trained mental health provider who can provide mental health and mental performance for our student athletes in that space. So that's a big goal that we have. And then continuing to grow the food and snacks we have available for our student athletes, as well as the programming and nutrition that we have for our student athletes. So some of those are some of the big goals across those 4 areas.
How do you prioritize all of those, A, equally, and B, have them done within that certain time frame that this department is looking for?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that completely yet. It's a moving target right now, and I think the biggest thing is to make sure that our practitioners in those spaces feel heard and we have the right goals in place. So we're still working on, we've got the big goals. Those are fairly easy to identify. But what is the growth for each of those goals each year? We're still working through. So one of the things we did in those areas is had the staff tell us what changes do we want to see in the next year tangibly here. And so we've identified some of those. We just finished our strength and conditioning and nutrition meeting and had kind of marked off some of the movements we had made on some of those goals already. So writing them down as a key component, knowing that they will be dynamic is something we have to adjust to. The world will change a lot in athletics in the next 6 years. So while we want to have those goals defined, we also need to be flexible with what that looks like and be ready to move. So we have to be innovative. We have to be a step ahead. We have to be dynamic in what we do, and we have to work harder than the person next to us.
It's a really good point you bring up. Within the next 6 years, in 3 or 4 years, there may be some new age technology that completely changes the script of what your job description looks like. You mentioned the athletic training staff, and we were kind of talking about this before we jumped on the podcast, Dr. Blom, just the way that they have to operate, all the teams that they oversee in such a short amount of time, from home events to road events to practices and everything. How are you seeing all of them come together and help this engine drive that unit?
Yeah, so we're fully staffed. We would love to have more staff, but we currently have all our positions full, which is not always the case, and it's a great staff. They really vary in their experiences and their expertise, really working to collaborate. So as we talked about this past weekend, we had all 10 of them and a couple volunteers and some students helping to manage the football team being gone, as well as hosting our first cross-country meet, to having golf and tennis competitions, and they are working above and beyond to cover all of those areas and really support our student athletes across the board, because we want our student athletes to not feel a difference depending on which athletic trainer they're working with. We want our athletic trainers to know enough about the student athletes that they're serving, even if they're not their normal sports, to be able to give them the best care. And then in some of those places, they're also caring for the teams that are visiting as well, depending on if they've brought sports medicine staff. So they really worked their tails off this past weekend, for example. They do all the time, but it was a really collaborative effort to prioritize our student athletes' well-being.
Well, Dr. Blom, before we let you go, is there anything you want Ball State fans to know about your position, sport performance, or anything like that?
Yeah, I want our fans to get on board with us for the 2030 vision, and there's lots of ways that they can contribute in reinforcing, rewarding, supporting those efforts, asking questions that helps us get better as well, and really recognizing the work that's done behind the scenes oftentimes, as well as really promoting that 1% growth we want to see for all of our student athletes.
Well, Dr. Blom, we appreciate you joining the podcast and for everything you've been doing the last little bit that you've been at Ball State. How long has it been now? You've been with the university in the athletics department for?
Just over a year.
Just over a year. Okay. There's a lot that's happened in a year.
There has been. It's been great, though. I've really enjoyed it.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mick, so much.
Hear every big play, every touchdown, and every win.
He catches it, barrels toward the end zone, and it's a Cardinals touchdown.
Fly, Cardinals, fly. Every moment that matters all season long is right here. The Cardinals travel to Central Michigan. Join us live Saturday, September 21st. Our coverage begins at noon.
All right, Cardinal fans, welcome back into This Week in Ball State Sports. We're with head football coach Mike New as Ball State's on the road again to Central Michigan this weekend. Coach, appreciate your time as always.
It's good to be here.
Coach, just looking back at Miami real fast, just from an overarching standpoint, when the game closes out, what'd you tell the team after that?
Yeah, it was a tough night in South Florida. Honestly, when you turn on the tape, we got our butt kicked. We played against a talented football team whose effort and physicality matched their talent. They didn't have no turnovers throughout the course of the game, no self-inflicted wounds, and obviously certainly tough for us that night. I don't think it was a matter of our guys not competing or not giving their best stuff. We just went up against a good football team who executed at a high level, and And, obviously it was tough to get them under control, if you will. And most important thing for us right now is to turn the page. I told the guys yesterday in the meeting, we're not going to lose this game twice. We're going to get corrected what needs to get corrected, whatever adjustments need to be discussed, but we're going to make sure we move forward to Central Michigan here, first conference game. We go on the road again. Both teams are having some of the same conversations in their meeting rooms as they prepare for the week of practice.
Coach Caden Simonza, quarterback, had a chance to play against a couple of SEC teams last year. He's an ACC team this year. How did you see him navigate the pocket?
Yeah, listen, he competed. It was obviously this was as good of the defensive line that we've faced since I've been here. Obviously, you go back to the Georgia game a year ago. Georgia was outstanding on the D-line, but this was as good of a defensive line as we have faced. They were attacking vertically off the ball. And obviously our guys competed up front, but obviously there wasn't a whole lot of time in the pocket. You had to be quick and decisive in terms of getting through your progressions in the passing game. And, I thought, did some good things throughout the course of the night, but obviously as soon as we would have some positive things happen with a drive, we would have a negative play or we'd get ourselves behind the chains. And when you do that, very difficult against a defensive football team like that.
Mike, with the delays that went on pregame, how do you handle that situation?
The hardest part, more than anything, was just it was about every 15 minutes there was a change, or every 20 minutes there was a change. So obviously if you go back and you say, hey, they tell you, you got a 2-hour delay here, what are you going to do with that? Then it's easier to plan accordingly. What are you going to do to try to feed the guys in the locker room? What are you going to do to try to still continue to meet with the guys and make sure you're reviewing the game plan, making sure guys are still staying locked in mentally? But it was the toughest challenge was just the every 15 minutes or so, like, hey, it went from this time to now 15 minutes later, now 15 minutes later, now 15 minutes later. So, obviously that was the biggest challenge. I was proud of our staff. I was proud of our support staff, proud of our trainers, proud of our strength staff, operations staff for just trying to navigate through, the unknown of not knowing how long that weather delay was going to last, and, had to order more food, had to get it delivered, all those things to try to make sure, because, for a lot of the guys, they eat pregame meal at 11:30, and so next thing you know, the first time we get on the field is, 2 hours after the projected kickoff time, so tough to not get them something from a nutrition standpoint.
Have you ever, throughout all of your time of playing football, coaching football, ever been through a delay like that?
Not on the front end. Been through a delay back year number one. We played on the road at Florida Atlantic and got called off the field 2 or 3 different times that night that extended, but never on the front end where the game hadn't even been kicked off and then to be sent back to the locker room. So first time that's happened, but, obviously, it's one of those scenarios that you got to try to navigate it the best you can.
Like you said, turn the page, attack week 3 against Central Michigan, 2 teams that are playing first conference games of the year. From a workflow this week, what do you want to see from your team in a response?
Yeah, obviously we gotta come back and we gotta punch back. We shift our focus to being the first conference game now. We've had some battles with Central Michigan over the years. You look at their tape the other day from Illinois. Really, in the first half, they were really back and forth and doing a good job in that game. Their second drive of the game, they scored a touchdown that was ultimately called back due to penalty. Had to settle for a field goal, but then right before the end of the first half, they took the ball down in a 2-minute drive. Got themselves in a position with the game 10-3, ultimately end up having to settle for a field goal there. And then in the second half there, Illinois ended up pulling away. But they're going to be coming back home, obviously preaching, taking care of the ball, making sure they do a good job of getting those things under control. And obviously for us, it all starts with making sure that we fully have turned the page. We can't have any lingering effects from what took place in that game the other night. We got to get ourselves back to work.
What's that messaging like to make sure you do turn the page from your player standpoint and make sure they're all in that right headspace to go attack this?
I met with the leadership council last night. Those guys are the voice of the team. They're the ones that are the heartbeat of the team. So if anybody knows what the pulse is in the locker room, it's that group of guys. And so obviously liked what I heard from that group of men that, they got to own it. We got to own it. Didn't go well for us the other night, but all of our focus and attention is shifted to our preparation and what the weekly process looks like here for Central Michigan.
It's always one of those interesting spots having a week 3 conference game, but I know for you guys it's another game. It's another week. Yes, this is a conference game that counts a little bit more. And you mentioned it, the close battles that Ball State and Central Michigan seemingly always have. When you look at what your team is capable of doing on a game-to-game basis, how do you be able to map out plans that work for a conference game like this this early in the season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just attacking the film. They got 3 games now from this season on film, and there's some similarities, obviously, to what they've done in the past. That Coach McElwain and his staff have been in place since 2019. A lot of the guys have been in place since 2019. So, obviously, you attack every film that you can get a chance, to watch, and that applies to what we're trying to get done. So again, it just, obviously you spend a lot of time on Sunday and Monday in the film room developing a game plan that's best for you to have a chance to have success. And each team has got some injuries like you do every year, so you got to make sure that your plan is adjusted accordingly to make sure you give your guys the best chance to go on the field and be successful.
From this Central Michigan team in particular, you said you've been able to dive into the film a little bit. They have some tape on them from their offensive standpoint. And you, like you said, you've been able to see what Coach McElwain's done for a couple of years now with the Chippewas. But what stands out about this year's team? Yeah,
well, obviously they got a new quarterback that's played through the first 3 weeks in Joey Labus that transferred there from Iowa. The game number 1 against Central Connecticut State. I mean, anything and everything they ran, they did such a great job. Obviously they were very explosive week number 1. Obviously it was the story week 2 when they were on the road at Florida International was the turnovers. Obviously had 5 interceptions in that game. Then obviously coming back, they obviously did a good job of making some corrections and not having some of those mistakes show up this past game against Illinois. And really they were right there in it going in to half there, and then came back out in the second half, and that's when Illinois ended up pulling away a little bit there. So this is going to be a good team, obviously defensively, structurally, and some of the personnel we're familiar with some of the returning starters that were with them a year ago, and so we're familiar with those guys, and having competed against a lot of them in the past. So it's going to be a well-coached football team that we got to put a plan together for all 3 phases: special teams, offense, defense. That we got to go out, and it's all about execution and our guys doing their job and getting yourself prepared for a 4-quarter battle.
This will be the real first taste for Caden Simonza at quarterback in Mid-American Conference play. How do you think the experience from the 4 games last year and then early on this season helps him prepare for the conference?
Yeah, I still think he is in a great spot mentally. I think he obviously the outcome of the game was the outcome of the game the other night. He still did a lot of positive things in that game, distributing the ball, made some big throws there, and obviously the game got out of hand there and made the decision to get him out. Didn't want to take an unnecessary shot or anything like that they obviously could set him back that way. So he does a great job of getting right back to work on the process and watching the tape and attacking the film and all that stuff. So not worried about him. I know he has prepared himself for Mid-American Conference play, and he knows how competitive it is.
Coach, just looking at your defense, how do you want to see that unit respond and get ready for Central Michigan?
Biggest challenge the other night was, in space, their speed in space and out on the perimeter. It was tough. Obviously they got great team speed, and those are things that, for us, we got to do a good job of working on that and attacking that in practice, because we know it's going to show up again. And this time we got to make sure that we're doing our part out on the perimeter to force the ball back inside, to leverage the ball back inside, whatever it may be. So we just got to attack that. And obviously we got to limit the explosive plays. There were a lot of explosive plays from Miami in that game. So again, getting back to work. I'm not worried about the confidence of our football team being shook, anything like that. I think it's a matter of we got to turn the page, obviously recognize and acknowledge that, listen, we got our butt kicked, and we got to get back to work here, because now all the attention and focus has got to be on MAC play and Central Michigan.
Like you mentioned, the explosive plays aspect of it, without diving too far into it, of course, how do you limit the big explosive plays while still getting enough pressure on teams and finding that right balance, especially when you get into conference?
Yeah, first of all, it all starts with, making sure we do our part, whatever that needs to happen in terms of making the quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket, because you give anybody time to throw, eventually they're gonna deliver a big one, or a big play could, potentially be part of it. So, for us, though, the speed and space the other night was the biggest challenge. Obviously, we struggled with footing the other night when it came time to change direction, or when we got out in space and you tried to transition from speed to power, and guys simply just lost their footing. So that was a challenge for us. There's absolutely no excuses, but it was a challenge for us, and obviously that's something that we got to just keep working on every day in practice.
Appreciate you as always, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Appreciate you having me.
Hear every big play, every touchdown, and every win.
He catches it, barrels toward the end zone, and it's a Cardinals touchdown.
Fly, Cardinals, fly. Every moment that matters all season long is right here. The Cardinals travel to Central Michigan. Join us live Saturday, September 21st. Our coverage begins at noon.
Hey, Cardinals fans, we're back on episode 4 of This Week in Ball State Sports, Season 2. Hey, this is very rare that you get to do this on a podcast right after a tournament win, especially for the Brittany Kelly Classic. But we're with head coach Cam Andry of Ball State Women's Golf. Coach, we're sitting down here at the Pavilion right after a win. This is awesome.
Yeah, man, this is great. I think I don't know how we're going to work this out, but if we keep winning, we're just going to have to keep me coming on the podcast. So hopefully you get tired of me. That's what I'm hoping for.
I think that's a good goal. We'll get tired of you. Hopefully here in a couple of weeks we'll have to say, Cam, we can't slot you in anymore. What did you see from your team, Cam? This was an impressive week again for the squad.
Yeah, really proud of them. We played some really good golf yesterday and built up a nice cushion. And, wasn't as pretty today, but found a way to get the job done. Jasmine winning individually as well. And so we had contributions all the way up and down the roster. And even – Jenna and Peyton played as individuals and showed some really good stuff too. And so it's good to see. Winning's really hard. And so getting the job done is impressive. It's also good for them to see that we're working on the right stuff. The work that they're putting in is paying off. It doesn't always happen that way, but when you do see the tangible results, that's really a good thing.
You mentioned Jasmine, tournament winner. What did you see from her the last couple of days that put her in a position to be able to win this thing?
She played some great golf. She made a bunch of birdies, and even when she made a few mistakes and made bogeys, she bounced back really quickly. She's worked really hard on her game the last week or so. It wasn't in a great spot a week ago, but we knew it wasn't that far off, and we knew probably just going back to the basics. Like, no need to push the panic button here. Just let's go back to the basics and find what is going to work for you and try to make the game easy. Hit fairways, hit greens, and that's what she did. And she played some great golf, kept her composure coming down the stretch. I was with her the last 9 holes, and she had a nice little lead. She made a couple bogeys in there, but bounced back with birdies. So yeah, it was fun to watch her win it.
So you're with the winner those last 9 holes. You're monitoring the scores. You're seeing what's happening. From a coach's perspective, is there anxiety there? Is there just a sense of calm? What's going through your head as you are watching Jasmine go through these last 9?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of angst because I wanted her to execute and to play well. I knew because I know Jasmine well. She was not going to be looking at the leaderboard, and in fact, when she tapped in, she stuffed it on 18 and tapped in for a birdie, and when she did, I gave her a fist pump and I said congrats, and she kind of looked at me and I said, have you looked at the leaderboard? And she said no, and I said, well, you got the job done, and so that was cool. She didn't even know what kind of margin she was dealing with. She actually had a little bit, 2 or 3 shot lead most of the back 9. But she hit some really good shots coming down the stretch, hit 15 and 2 and nearly made eagle, tap in birdie there. And then, the birdie on 18 to finish it off. So really just great golf from her all the way around.
That's such a sense of locked in when she's like, no, I don't know what's going on. Like, and you that's a leader. That's a winner. That's why she wins these tournaments.
Yeah. And, you don't even have that benefit in other sports. Like the scoreboard's pretty front and center. You know what's going on. But in golf, you do. And some players are different. But I know Jasmine, she is just, I want to hit the shot. I'm in this moment right now, and I'm going to execute this shot to the best of my ability. And it doesn't matter if I'm down 4 or up 4, somewhere in between. And so that's the way she handled it, really the whole tournament. And she played just some really great golf. And I love it because she's been a champion in the way she's operated for a long time. And now she actually has the trophy to go along with it, which is a cool thing.
You say operate like a champion. How does she take care of her business in that way to make sure today is just, you know what, another day at the course?
I mean, she is the same person day in, day out. She shows up and gets to work with a smile on her face. She does not get flustered very easy. She works. We've got a bunch of hard workers, and she is an extremely hard worker in everything that she does. You know, I mean, she's a fantastic student. She busted in the weight room. She gets after it on the golf course, and the little things in her game where we've kind of challenged her, like, hey, I think you can get a little bit better with your short game. Well, she went home to Australia over the summer break, and she came back and she's got like all these new shots in short game. And we're like, okay, whatever you needed to work on, you did it. And so she's the kind of kid you love to coach because that's just the way she operates.
Cam, it was super interesting. After the tournament concluded, you said, hey, we didn't really have a good week of practice. And then you come out here and you ended up winning the tournament. Is there a switch that flips when it's tournament time, or was it, hey, we learned from what we did wrong in practice this week?
I wish I had the answer to that. I don't really know. I was anxious as we got started yesterday morning with the first round because I was just like, we need to get off to a good start. And I think if we get off to a pretty good start, we probably can, settle in. And we did. We made some birdies and some pars early, and they put it together. But I also think that's, we're playing in our lineup this week was 3 juniors and 2 sophomores, and they've got a lot of tournament experience. And so a lot of them have played a lot of tournaments for us over the past year or two. And so in that regard, you're just like, okay, we're going to lean on the preparation, the cumulative preparation, not just the last couple of days, but all of it. And they work hard year round on this thing. And so now it doesn't guarantee you're going to get the results that you want. So it is fun when you do get the results. I wish I knew more about why that happens, but yeah.
Cam, so Brittany Kelly Classic, of course, the Kelly family in attendance for the tournament. Just from a perspective of how vital is it for this tournament to go on in the honor and the legacy of Brittany Kelly's name?
Yeah, Brittany was here. We overlapped a couple years during my time at Ball State, and always just appreciated what a competitor she was when she played. And then, I mean, even what she did after she left Ball State in the golf world, qualifying for the PGA Professional Championship. I mean, she really leaves a really good legacy as a golfer, but she's also just they're a wonderful family, and Brittany fought her battle, valiantly. And so I know it means a lot to her family to have this event continue, and it's cool because our players, they feel it, and they've all met her family, and so it's real, it's tangible to them, and it's not just a name on a tournament. Like they understand there's a legacy here, and so it does mean a little bit more to them, means a little bit more to me for sure, and it's good when you get that win, and we're just we are honored to be a little part of carrying Brittany's legacy on.
I think it's always so cool, and so it gives you chills to see Brittany Kelly's family out there taking pictures with the team post-tournament. What kind of emotions does that invoke?
Yeah, I couldn't let myself probably think too much about it because I would feel that emotion, and her. I could sense it from them as well, her family, that this was a special day, and it's a special day to them whether we win or not, but it probably is a little more special when the team goes out and gets the job done, and Jasmine gets the job done too.
It's a very competitive tournament field that you all have with the 10-plus teams in this tournament. How does that help set you up for future success this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you got to play with the lead, which we hope to do it often, but you don't always get those opportunities. So it's great to build on that experience. We had a couple MAC teams, and so it's good to finish ahead of them as well. And you work hard. You only get a handful of opportunities. we only play about 10 to 12 tournaments a year, and so you just don't get that many chances to go win it. And so it's great to win. I think you try to build on some momentum. Quick turnaround for us heading right down to South Carolina tomorrow, but that's another great thing that, hopefully riding a win, we can build on it.
You mentioned it heading to the next tournament. It is about 3:20 on Tuesday afternoon, 8:15. Cars roll out, right?
Yeah, it's going to be. I told them go home, get a little rest, make sure you do the laundry because we gotta hit the road again tomorrow morning. But it'll be good. I was excited for us to be invited to this tournament at Furman. It's a really good mid-major field. Will be a really good test for us, and playing in a different part of the country, different grass. And so there'll be some things where we'll be challenged to make some adjustments on the fly. And I think that's good. And our goal as we continue to build this program, we want to win a MAC championship and we want to compete in the postseason. And if you're going to do those things, you've got to be willing to accept the challenges. You can't shy away from them. You got to go chase them down in some regards. And that's what we're trying to do this week.
Well, Cam, congratulations on a tournament win and best of luck the rest of the way. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Mick. Appreciate you and all you do.
Thanks for listening to This Week in Ball State Sports, presented by Gainbridge. The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Gainbridge Ball State Cardinals Sports Network.